Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second episode to Heartwork. We have a beautiful author and friend of mine, Ashlyn Mckayla Ohm, today with us. And just to give you guys a recap on what Heartwork is, this is a podcast on poetry that reaches the eye, the ear, and the heart. And I've just been reeling with excitement on our talk today, Ashlyn, because I know that you are very passionate about nature in poetry. And we have a lot of exciting questions to just kind of throw back and forth with each other, and I'm really excited about that. But first, what I would like to do is introduce you. And I have your bio here. So, Ashlyn is a worshiper of the Creator and a wanderer of creation. She is most at home where the streetlights die and the pavement ends. She is the author of the poetry collection High Country Hymnal, and her poems have been featured by Anslem Society, Calla Press, Vessels of Light, Clay Jar Review, and more. If she's not dreaming about her next writing project, you'll find her hiking, bird watching, or otherwise getting lost in the woods. And when I post this, you guys will see her links and her socials. She's also an intern at Rabbit Room Press. Am I correct at that?
At the rabbit room itself,
Yes, at
yes.
the Rabbit Room. Yes, yes. I
Yes.
know they're doing amazing things when it comes to these poetry hours on Friday. And yeah, so I know we met through creative circles. And really, I think I remember when you submitted to Vessels of Light, and we just it's been a beautiful connection. But welcome.
Thank you so much. That's a lovely intro. And thank you so much for having me. It's so fun to be here and just talk about all of this goodness with you and poetry.
I love that. Thank you. And you know what? Goodness is a good, it really is. I think that when we're going to talk about nature today, our key verse for today is Psalms 24:1. I mean, there's so much scripture that exalts, God through creation, from Genesis on, but I thought this one would be really fitting. It says, "The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein." And I think that's so poetic. And we can sit with that. I'm curious your thoughts, as a nature poet, like
Mhm.
where we can kind of go into the first question. Let's just chat a little bit about creation itself as like poets, maybe I would actually say probably the poet's most popular canvas. Um,
Yes.
and yeah, I'd love to hear from you a little bit about that. And even painters, painters love nature. Got a little bit of some nature.
Yes. Yes. Um, well, I just want to sit with and acknowledge first that key verse. Um, because I think that it sets up a connection for us. So the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell within. And I think the first sort of mindset that we have to have for nature poetry is this understanding that, yes, nature is God's and so are we. We are part of this. And so there is a somewhat of a harmony that exists between nature and ourselves as we both are creations of the Lord.
Yeah.
And so I think there is that interconnection a little bit of people, whether they realize it or not, being able to sense that connectivity with him in what he's made. So I
Yeah.
think that is one reason, but I think also um, all all poetry is sort of anaphrastic, right? Whether it's inspired by human-made art, it can be inspired by God-made art. And I think that nature is a really inspiring starting point to sort of pay tribute to the art that has already been made.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. Wow, so well spoken. This connection that we have with nature. You're right. And you know what? I think this is going to be so beautiful for us to dive into. I have this romantic period. We're going to look a little bit at the romantic poets. Now, some of the school of poets that were in the romantic period, we're not going to talk about because they just totally were, they're not God-centered. And so I do want to say in this, but there were some that were like Wordsworth and Blake. So I want to focus on them because it really does matter as a Christian artist, what we're seeing, like you just said. We recognize that nature in us, we're not one and the same,
Mhm.
but because we were fashioned from dust. However,
Mhm.
and we are the pinnacle creation of God. It's Imago Dei, made in the image of God, Latin for that. But there's something so intrinsic when we sit in like when we sit okay, I don't know if touching grass, whatever that means, like when you kind of touch grass or like you put your feet in like the shore and like there's this connectivity that it is very spiritual. And I do think, I mean, God
Yes.
has made it for that.
Yes.
Um one of our first poets that we are going to go into is Mary Oliver. She is famous
Mm.
in the contemporary world for I mean, gazing and gaping at nature, which we'll talk about those two words in a little bit. But the epigraph I wanted to pull today was from Invitation. That's a book of hers. And it says, "It is a serious thing just to be alive on this fresh morning in this broken world." Um, one thing one thing I did want to, since we're talking about creation, I'll just jump down to that question, Ashlyn. Like, um, with prelapsarian beauty before the fall,
Mhm.
um, and this Edenic quality that as Christian poets, my question for you is going to be, um, why is it important for Christians to preserve the Edenic quality in our poetry while still being real that there is brokenness in this world? I'd love to hear from you about that because, um, yeah, this preservation of Eden, you know,
Mhm.
I know God, it was always the plan for us
Right. Yeah.
to be in paradise.
Yeah.
Then sin came in and now it's sad. We see a lot of brokenness. For
Mhm.
us, we just saw the Pacific Palisade fires that hit Los Angeles
Mhm.
last.
Yes.
I mean, burnt hills upon burnt hills. But a therapist one time told me that even when there's burnt hills or a single seed on scorched hills
Mm.
could
Yeah.
produce growth again. And I
Yes.
mean, I'd love to hear from you, like kind of beauty from ashes kind of feel. What do you feel?
Mm. Well, I think that's such a valuable question because if we are not truthful about either half of that, then our work is not as valuable as it could be, right? I think we have to tell the truth about the brokenness and we have to tell the truth about the beauty. If we only talk about the brokenness, which, as you said, is so evident, like
Mm.
we don't have to be poets to know the world is broken. You can just turn on your TV, you can just look at your own day-to-day life and see the world is broken. And if we just fixate on that, then that is only despair and hopelessness.
Right.
But if we go to the opposite extreme and we say, no, no, everything's fine, it's fine, it's
Yeah.
good, and I think there is a tendency or has been in kinds of popular Christian media to be like, oh no, it's okay because we're going to go to heaven and God is
Right.
good and
Right.
all of this, it's all going to work out. And
Yes.
well, that's true, that is true, but you have to be fully honest about both sides of that.
Yeah.
And if you slide to one side or another, people do feel that in your work and they know you're not being honest for
Mhm.
whatever reason. And that's what I also love Mary Oliver's poetry. She is just such a wonderful poet and a wonderful observer, I would say, of nature.
Yes.
And and I love how she combines these images in that line from invitation that it is a serious thing just to be alive on this fresh morning in this broken world.
Is it a book or is it a poem? I don't know. I mean, it might be a
No,
poem.
I'm sorry, her book.
No, no,
Yes.
you're
So
right.
sorry.
Look it up. Someone look it up. Oh,
Yeah,
it's
tell
called
us.
Invitation on by Mary Oliver. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, tell us, tell us.
Yeah.
But
But yeah,
yeah, she combines this idea of the fresh morning and the broken world. And I think that's where we sit as
yeah,
poets. We
yeah,
sit at the intersection of the fresh morning, the Edenic glory, and the broken world.
yeah,
And it's our job to be able to help people look at the brokenness kind of through the lens of Eden.
yeah,
Because at the end of the story, we are back in the garden,
yeah.
right? We are back in the garden, in nature, in creation, and yet it's not just the garden, it's now the garden city. It's what
New Jerusalem.
mankind
Yeah,
is allowed to build and to bring what we have made that was good and pure and true and beautiful into the garden
yeah,
and inhabit that space with God. And I think we're each trying as Christian poets. I know I am. We're striving for to build sort of that garden city in our work right now.
That's so well said. I was just thinking about these kind of two like opposite, like, I think that there's, a lot of people like maybe if they're not, wherever they stand with faith, they'll maybe say, let's save the world, save the world.
Mhm.
That's not our job. I think
Right.
if I think about it, Jesus Christ, the incarnate God, he came already to save us by
Mhm.
walking this broken world, but he left us with a promise that he's going to return. And also, I think, so back to our poet's job is not to save the world. I think it's to savor the world, savor the world. And
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
I think,
Yes.
and to
Yes.
savor the world for where it stands. And also, like, I love that you mentioned this like kind of fresh intersection between fresh and brokenness. Like, I just
Mhm.
love that you mentioned the word value, that we, preserving valuableness, value, and
Yeah.
also vulnerability and honesty. It's so necessary. And on that note, like, we can have a holy expectation looking forward to the new heaven and earth. And so,
Mhm.
on that note, let's go ahead and open up the poem from Mary Oliver. It's called Wings, and I would love for you to read this poem for us, Ashlyn. I would love for you to, yes.
Absolutely. Wings. I saw the heron poise like a branch of white petals in the swamp, in the mud that lies like a glaze, in the water that swirls its pale panels of reflected clouds. I saw the heron shaking its damp wings, and then I felt an explosion, a pain, also a happiness I can hardly mention as I slid free. I saw the world through those yellow eyes as I stood like that, rippling under the mottled sky of the evening that was beginning to throw its dense shadows. No, said my heart, and drew back. But my bones knew something wonderful about the darkness, and they thrashed in their cords. They fought. They wanted to lie down in that silky mash of the swamp, the sooner to fly.
Thank you, Ashlyn. It's beautiful. It's such a man, I know that I love that you use the word observant, and we'll dive in here. It's fun as we're on this podcast together. We're gonna just like improvise, interpret. I think it's really fun as poets to kind of, take it as we go, and we can even look at it stanza by stanza. There's a shift, a volta moment. So volta is Italian
Yes.
for turn, and I think we're both hitting on the nose where we know where it's at. We'll get
Mhm.
to that in a minute. But we first start off with just a simple observation of this bird, and her language is very precise, poise and petals, and then we get to, the pale. She's playing with some alliteration here with the, the language, and I think it's beautiful how she looks at the swamp and the mud with a glaze. A glaze is
Yes.
a really beautiful kind of like coating. Um, and what do you see in these first three stanzas?
I think that she's intentionally drawing on some artistic metaphors here. She pictures the bird as this branch of white petals in the swamp, which is just such a wonderful, arresting image.
Hmm,
I also love the way that the word poise has its own line. It is literally poised there in that first stanza, and you're forced to take that pause for a moment and see the stillness of the bird.
love it.
And then, yes, like you said, the mud that lies like a glaze, we see that as, a glaze on ceramics or some sort of decorative finish. And
Hmm.
so it would be easy to write this poem and be like, well, the bird was beautiful, but, it was in this mud. But I'm not going to talk about the mud. I just want to talk about the bird because the bird is beautiful.
Yeah.
But she doesn't do that.
Mhm.
She's very honest about this whole scene.
Yep.
Um, she's honest about what she's seeing and she sees it redemptively. She sees this
Absolutely.
mud as
Something
something
beautiful.
beautiful, part
Yeah.
of the art. And in fact, not to jump ahead, but we'll see at the end, the mud becomes more important than the bird in a way.
Yeah.
It's kind of full redemptive circle that she's drawing.
I love that. Yeah, no, it's so true. The poet's I think gift is to make things that are terrifying and even scary and maybe ugly something beautiful again. And I think this is something that she does really beautifully. And what? I think the first half of the poem has a pastel. If I'm color coding, I would say like we have pale panels, we have these
Yes.
reflected clouds up here, and there's going to be a certain darkness that comes later, which we'll talk about. But let's go a little bit further. So we saw the heron. This is when, it's not even just the heron poised. That was the first verb. Then we
Yeah.
have it, now it's shaking. And
Mhm.
it's, I'm sure like how, birds like,
Yeah, yeah.
they clean themselves, like they shake off the water. It's damp wings. Something
Mhm.
happens to the speaker when they see the shaking. And I think I'm compelled to say ecstasis because I know that word is like out
Mm.
of body experience, when you
Ah,
have this like see something in nature that kind of shocks you to your core like an electric bolt. But I feel like that's what I see here because she says, I felt an explosion. M dash. We love the M dashes because they give us this kind of intentional pause. Um,
right.
and a pain. That's interesting that she says that. I'm curious your thoughts on this reaction from the speaker.
Mhm. I think that this quote is eluding me, but it's from C.S. Lewis, and I'm mangling the words, but his idea is that when we see the face of God, there is pain, right? But it is a glorious pain that we would not trade for any kind of earthly pleasure.
Wow.
And I've always been struck by that idea. But the most true experiences in my life and the times when I have come the closest to that ecstasis, as you're talking about, is kind of indefinably painful. There is almost a wrenching, and I don't know how to account for that, but um, there is uh, we could say we could call it longing, we could call it that eternity, calling from within us back to itself,
Yeah.
and yet there is always some sort of um, there is always pain associated with the ecstatic moment. We see that scripturally, we see that in our own experience, we just see that in the lives of saints throughout the ages, is that the to have these moments of insight does not come cheaply, would we say. And so she says this explosion, pain, happiness she can hardly mention. That
I
is
love
a that's so wonderful. It's a trinity, right? It's a trinity of emotions that she is feeling in a moment when she
that.
is rather literally encountering God through this icon of the bird and the setting.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You know what? I studied the Sublime in my master's program with Immanuel Kant. He is a German philosopher, and he talks about it is different than beauty because sublime things like a gaping night sky or something that it transcends our understanding, but it also shocks us. It can be terrifying and so
Mm.
gorgeous at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
I think
Mhm.
like this is, and what you said is so beautiful. I've never heard of that C.S. Lewis quote, but I am like shook by that because we know our God on the cross. There was
Yeah.
nothing more beautiful than
Mhm.
our beaten Savior. Like, I mean, we could go on and on that.
Oh, yes.
But like, with just his like pierced side and all the, everything he bore for us, there's no be more beautiful crown than the crown of thorns, the things like that, but like I think like going back to this poem, I can hardly mention this. Like as I slid free. So what happens in the ecstasis, in this excitement, in this painful bliss, maybe we can call it, is a kind of freedom and a
Mhm.
release. And she sees the world through these yellow eyes. And yellow is such a symbolic color. I think, it's not just sunshine and rainbows. It's more so like this. I usually look at yellow actually with the word ascension because yellow, well, blue is probably more ascension because it gets bluer as we go up. But I would say yellow is like an ascension with like a sunrise and
Yes.
yellow in the sense of like hope and joy. And I'm wondering what you think about this, seeing the world through these heron's eyes.
Mhm. I think that there's an element in this poem of um, sort of a little bit of teleology happening here, where it's this idea of what is the ultimate end, right? What is the ultimate purpose? And there is a way in which nature can also be inspiring to the poet because nature is just being itself and glorifying God through being what it was made to be. As humans, we get
That's
very encumbered with, all of our agendas and our frustrations and our worries and our ambitions and all of these little things that we get tied up in. And yet nature sort of just unerringly does what it was created to do. There's another Mary
Yes.
Oliver poem where she talks to the roses, and she tells the roses her fears and all that's wrong in her world, and the roses say, "Well, excuse us, we're very busy being roses," right? And
I
is there is this
love
idea,
that.
yeah, that we need to be busy being ourselves and we need to
Yeah,
be busy existing
yeah,
and actually living out how we were created.
yeah.
How can I be me? And this is worship. And we can learn that from watching nature. And so I read this as she sort of enters that point of view through imagining herself as the heron. She's able to kind of discard that overthinking for a minute and get in on this deeper plane of being, which is another thing that nature does for us. It can be a
Yes.
conduit to give us a different point of view, even if it's the point of view of the mountain that has stood there forever, or the
Yes.
that's there. It gives us such a different perspective.
You actually you bring up the question that I had written that we'll talk about is like, how can nature speak very well to our own human condition? We are
Mm.
not, animals. We are not, plants,
Right.
but they speak to us in the way of metaphor and similes, and I love
Yes.
that. And we'll keep going on this poem because we'll talk about that, but I'd love to hear more. And in this, there's very active verbiage. I was taught by Professor David Hernandez in workshop that active verbiage, like hot off the stove, like, Robert Frost and Emily Dickinson would say, is super important. You don't want lazy verbs. And I think that this poem does a really good job at like rippling and, these kind of throwing its dense shadows. And like, so I think then we get to this, the speaker, I think what's happening is sunset's happening and dusk
Yeah.
is coming on. And, the mottled sky, that means it's very splotchy. It's not really attractive. Evening is coming, shadows. Now we're getting this descent. And then I
Mm.
love this stanza. It's no,
Yes.
said my heart and drew back. Like there was a kind of fear that takes place
Yes.
here. And I want to know, maybe you can help me understand because I was having a hard time knowing what was thrashing in their chords, if it was the bones,
Mhm.
because my bones knew something wonderful about the darkness. What do you
Mhm.
think about this stanza? It's really romantic, it's gorgeous, it's just, yeah.
It is a glorious stanza. This is sort of
It
these
is.
last two stanzas are the payoff of the poem, really.
Mhm.
And by this point, again, we've sort of left the bird, or we haven't left the bird, but we are the bird. We've entered into uh to that perspective.
Yes. Hmm.
And so I think I read this as um there is always fear associated with the sublime or with the ecstatic.
Hmm.
Um, and this is just because we're human. Uh, the first thing angels say to people is, "Do not be afraid,"
Yeah.
which tells you how they're being received.
And so,
Apparently, there is a
yeah,
need to tell people not to be afraid.
yeah.
And also, again, just personally, the times in my life when I've had these experiences that brought me to, the brink of what I could express verbally, where I really felt as though I was moving sort of past that point. There is so much fear just because it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And our finiteness and our humanness is all we know. Um, and I say, I believe we don't even know truly how to be human, right? We won't until we are resurrected in the new creation. And just a calling back to that Edenic perspective is
Right.
scary to us. We have never known this.
It's frightening. Yeah, it
Yes.
is. But it's like
Yes.
a good awakening. It's almost like
Yes.
this freedom,
Yes.
this liberation to know
Yes.
that something this startling can exist for us. And I
Yes.
love how
Yes.
thank you for mentioning that there is this kind of shift where the speaker is in fact becoming well, a mirror to the bird.
Inhabiting. Yeah,
Yes,
inhabiting the
because
bird. Yes.
we
Yeah.
see in this last stanza. So what do you think is thrashed in the chords?
I think that's the bones.
Yeah, I think the bones are
My
kind of
bones
like
knew
breaking.
something
Yeah,
right. There's
yeah,
a struggle for release, we might say. And
I
I
get you.
love that line. My bones knew something wonderful about the darkness. Yeah, it's this
Yeah,
idea,
yeah,
almost like the mind, the head and the heart, right? Like
yeah.
logically, she's telling herself, no, I don't want to go through this. I'm afraid of this. And yet the core of her being, her true self knows something wonderful about the darkness. And there is something wonderful about the darkness. That is where work happens and
Yeah.
growth happens and transformation takes place. And I read the thrashing in their chords as the bones wanting to break free to be able to be resurrected.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Even if we think about the garden and the tomb
Yes,
from, that void,
yes,
that
yes.
darkness, that middle point, that middle zone. And
Mm,
even thinking of darkness, I was like, you know what? When he was creating the night sky, when he was creating the stars in the sky, and it was dark at night, darkness doesn't have to be scary. Like,
right.
I think like
Yes.
we automatically associate it with like, all this stuff. And I'm like, no, like we can sit in the thick of darkness. Actually, one of my favorite poets, Denise Levertov, she's a, British American poet. She talked about writing at night, like just continue to write through
Mm,
night, and like, or something like that. And I wrote that in my thesis because I was like, maybe, yeah, we may survive in the darkness, but we really thrive in the light. And so I
yeah.
think like, we can, but there's a purpose to darkness. And I think like
Mm,
I love this. I guess that affirms the ecstasis with the thrashing and the chords, trying to like
yes.
get out of your own body, get out of your own.
Yes. Yes.
But this last stanza, because we'll keep going on here. Thank you guys for listening. We're gonna take a short break. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. We're not doing any breaks here. We're gonna keep going. But I would say they fought. The bones fought. They wanted to lie down in
Mm,
that silky mash. That's really beautiful. Like now the swamp has become this kind of silky bed. And it's
mm,
really beautiful. And then I looked it up like sooner to fly. I was like, what does that really mean? It means like, the bones would take their rest in that marsh to get ready
mm,
to fly sooner, to
yeah.
go to be ready to take their own flight. And
Yes.
so I just would love to hear your closing thoughts about this poem.
I think this is a poem of resurrection and the hope of resurrection.
I love
Um,
that.
but I really love, I think it's such a perfect example of a very well done nature poem because it
Yeah.
starts with noticing a very simple, ordinary moment in nature. This is not, you know, Mary Oliver's Ode on the Grand Canyon or something that nobody, the few people would maybe have the opportunity to see. This
Yeah.
is just a bird in the mud. Nearly every person can find a place where we can see a bird in the mud. And so she takes this ordinary moment that is around us all the time. She's able to observe it with loving attention. The word attention means you're stretching toward something. That's the literal root. You're stretching toward. And so she stretches her heart, her eyes toward this. And through that, she enters into spiritual insight as a result. And I think that's just the beauty of a nature poem and the power of it.
It's so beautiful. Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you guys for workshopping this poem with us. We're going to go into talking a little bit more about the romantic poets now. I have this book here. It's a textbook and it's talking about romantic nature poetry. And, it says the natural scene for them had become a primary poetic subject. Um, Even just talking about like natural phenomena with an accuracy of observation that had no earlier match in its ability to capture the sensuous nuance. Um,
Mhm.
and then I love how James Thompson and other descriptive poets of the preceding century had depicted the created universe as giving direct access to God, and
Mm.
even as itself possessing the attributes of divinity. So I really love, we're going to go into Mr. William Wordsworth, because I found this poem by him, and I believe the title is called Daffodils, because, there was one, I wandered lonely as a cloud, and I found the title of it. So, but we'll take a little break. I think let's circle back to that question about how nature can speak very well to our human condition. I want to hear a little more from you, like about how even in your poetry, like what sources of nature do you feel drawn to speak to your personhood or your persona or even humankind as it were, as it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Humanity is not extinct, okay? Okay, good.
I am super drawn to the mountains. This is my, go-to place for
Mm,
inspiration, for being inspired. So I love writing about the mountains. I love writing about birds. I write a lot about birds. Very, very captivated by birds and enjoy writing about them in my poetry.
yep.
Um, but but I also think how does nature speak to the human condition? I think because nature is full of metaphor. It's just so rich.
So is.
There's so much to draw from, and it is sort of a tangible access point.
Hmm.
Um, yes, we can make the mistake of saying, well, nature is God, right? That's one mistake that can be made.
Right.
There's an equal mistake of saying, well, nature is just stuff. A tree is just stuff. A
Hmm.
tree is just matter. A rock is just minerals.
Hmm.
A river is just water. That is an equal and opposite error.
Mm.
So what I would say is, nature is an icon, a collection of icons. And what I mean by icon is I'm drawing a little bit on the work of Madeline L'Engle here, but I'm saying an icon is that access point through. We move through that into the presence of God. It's almost
I love
the
that.
idea of a window. Yeah, so you move
Yeah.
through the window to the view outside. You don't worship the window. You don't look at the window and say,
No.
"Oh my goodness, this window is amazing." You move through that window into a greater reality beyond it.
Mm.
And so I think that is the beauty of nature is that all of these metaphors are tiny icons pointing us back to some form of truth and some facet of God's character. And we can look at a bird and say, well, he must delight in beauty because look how lovely this bird is. And we can look at the river and think about, wow, he has a plan for us that is unfailing, just like the course of this river. And we can look at the mountain and think he is very patient, to stand for all of this time and wait on people to come. And so in all these phases of nature and these different elements, we see aspects of God's character, and then we have the perspective to see ourselves in relation to that.
Yes, that's so beautiful. I mean, there are so many, I wrote that down as a question. We'll look at it. A long-standing fascination for poets and birds,
Yeah.
is Dickinson, Wordsworth, Keats, and, I think what you sort of hit on is like why are poets so enamored with, oh, let's take
Mhm.
take birds. I think there's a type of flight, a type of just such a
Yes.
fluid beauty. And we're going to talk about your bird poem today. She has a lovely bird poem that we'll get to in a minute. Um, but I love that you said this kind of like this gateway from nature being an access point to our creator, because there's so many, examples in scripture that talk about, the sparrows and, lilies that are more beautiful than Solomon's clothing. And like,
Mhm.
and we are cherished much greater than they. And so, oh man, it's just so beautiful. Our God is the greatest artist. I know Jesus just,
Yes.
man, like we can't help but.
Yes.
My church says, sorry if you guys are here. Can you hear text messages going off? I'm sorry. Okay, good, good. That we are created to create, period. Like we
Yes.
literally are made in the image of the most fabulous, fantastical
Mhm.
creator, Jesus Christ. He is. And he can't help but create because he's a creator. I mean, the enemy
That's
destroys.
what love does. Love
Right.
overflows in creation. Yeah.
Right. And so we being, made in that image of the creator, we can't help but create. So it's just
Right.
amazing. So we're gonna go into our next poem. And this is I like for this podcast, I really wanted to merge contemporary classic and then the guest that's on for them to bring in a poem. So we're gonna go into our classical era now, and we're going to talk about the romantic poem Daffodils by William Wordsworth. And I'll go ahead and read this one. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. They stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay. In such a jocund company, I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft, when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. Oh, I love this poem.
So good. So
Um,
rich.
actually, I was just for my graduation photos, I got these yellow daffodils, and I just think that yellow's just it's such a fabulous color. I love the way that the daffodils kind of have these like bell-shaped centers, and then
Mhm.
they kind of like go out like this. Um,
Yes.
and so what I love about the voice of this speaker, and one thing that the question I'll ask you, I mean, the romantic poets like him, he is very much one of the leading romantic poets.
Yes.
They were famous for their admiration of the natural world. I mean, in fact, there was, the French Revolution going on and things I think that were affecting, just even this kind of gloom of industrial
Mhm.
revolution that caused a kind of discomfort in the poets of that time. But they really I think this will be my question that we'll get to in a minute, but how might we benefit from adopting this kind of appreciation that the Romantic poets had of nature? They have a deep amazement and a deep attention. So in this poem, what I notice is we talked about this idea with Mary. She observes nature, you know,
Mhm.
um, uh, Kim Adonisio, I think she's a contemporary poet. She talks about, I think, if I'm thinking correctly, we're observers first. Writers, we
Yes.
observe.
Yes.
Patty Saburn, who's my poet chair. She's amazing. She's like the one who walked with me into my entire degree. She talks about a lot of the work happens off the page. So when we
Yes.
go and we observe like a natural sight, we're
Mhm.
collecting. We're actually kind of like scientists. We're like collecting. We're collecting
Yeah.
ideas.
Yeah.
Um, but it's so beautiful because the speaker's kind of alone. And I do have a question on solitude, but I don't get ahead of myself. But that's kind of just like the speaker is like a cloud. In romantic poets, oh man, they loved their clouds for some reason.
Yes.
And then he spots this gorgeous, like bundle host of gold and daffodils. And the way that he describes these is like literally like the lilies in scripture, like Solomon's kind of like,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
just so
Yeah.
beautiful. I'd love to hear your thoughts on your response to this piece.
Well, I think that's fascinating. That's absolutely true. We are collectors, right? And the work does happen off the page. And I think you see that in this point because he goes for this walk. He sees this site, and then he takes it home.
Hmm.
And in his inner eye, it keeps appearing, and he kind of holds this close to his heart. And then a poem grows out of that. He even says, he
Oh,
gazed
you're
and gazed,
right.
but
I
little
forgot he goes
thought
home.
what
Mhm.
wealth the show had brought. He didn't know at the time. He's not looking at thinking, oh, I've got this. This is a poem
Mhm.
necessarily, but he's able to take this experience home and create something out of that when it's grown in him. And again, this is daffodils. This is a small, ordinary thing. And
Yeah,
I really want to encourage people always, and I do, try to just give people encouragement in this direction that start small. You can
yeah,
take some tiny aspect of nature outside your window, and that can become the launching point. If you're listening to this and being inspired, I want to try nature poetry. That's awesome. And just
yes.
take something small like that. Even if you live in the city, you have the sky, you have the sun, you have clouds, like there are
I
birds
I'm so
outside
happy.
your window.
I'm so happy that you're advocating for that. Yes, whoever's listening, just know this, that the smallest thing on this planet can be the most spectacular thing that you
Yes.
capture.
Mhm.
I'm just looking at we can go as long as we could talk for ages, but I will say that I want to point you guys to Rainier, he has a unique name. He's a German
Yes.
romantic poet, Rilke. You guys are, Rilke. He said, if you will stay close to nature, to its simplicity, to the small things hardly noticeable, those
Yeah.
things can unexpectedly become great and immeasurable. So
Yes.
this is the beauty of of a poet that loves nature. We get to put a magnifying glass on things that are seemingly mundane and we make them we don't make them miraculous. Our attention to them makes
Yes.
us realize that they are
Yes.
indeed miraculous. Um, and I love what you just said. Yeah, this is just beautiful. And thank you for pointing that out because I didn't realize that at the last stanza, he does go home. He
Yeah.
goes home. So, I just think that the way that he kind of like sees the multitude of them, he even compares them to being more beautiful than even the waves. And we know there's a lot of ocean
Mm.
poetry out there. Um,
Yeah.
Jocund, what a fun word. I think that's just such a
Yes.
fun.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
and what does that word mean again? Oh my goodness. Jocund. What does that word mean?
Very, very amiable and upbeat, kind of.
Cheerful, merry. Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
It's just such a jocund company. Um, I love it. And that let's settle on this word gaze because then we're going to go to your poem in a little bit to talk about agape. Gazing is something that we really need to do as poets to watch.
Yeah.
Um, Staring is not a strange thing as a poet, actually. We are collecting, like we said, not only just information, but inspiration. And so
Yes.
I think like, what do you think about this? He uses it twice. So I gazed, and then he has it
Yeah.
isolated with two M dashes, and gazed.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it definitely suggests that he was looking at those daffodils for some time.
Oh, yes, for sure. Um, I think that we are very quick to pass by things.
Oh my
We
gosh,
can
yeah. We're so busy.
and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. We can pass by people very quickly. We can glance at them and decide, okay, yeah, I know how the person is or whatever. We can pass, we can kind of live our lives with kind of head down, what's my next thing? What's my next thing? What's my next thing? And we don't look up.
Hmm.
Um,
We're
I think
rushed. People rush
we're
through
very
life.
rushed, very
Yeah.
rushed. And you have to have those moments of just
Oops.
stop and total stillness, you
Yeah.
know, to be able to look at something long enough that you love it, even if you didn't at first.
I love that. This idea of like looking at it long enough so that you grow a love for it.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, that's so beautiful. And so back to that question, you're right. He goes back down and then it is beautiful to see Gerard Manley Hopkins had this idea of the inscape. I don't fully
yes,
understand it
yes,
yet, but how
yes.
do how do you understand the inscape? What is that?
I don't think anyone understands the inscape is the thing, but I interpret the inscape as the kind of terrain of the heart, maybe.
Beautiful.
It's my very loose interpretation of
The
what he
inward
meant.
eye.
Yeah, yes. This
Yeah.
idea of what is collected in the soul, what our experiences, our emotions,
Hmm.
everything that we've gone through, we've sort of added that to the inscape. It's the landscape, but it's internal.
Oh, that's
Um,
beautiful.
that's my rough guess.
Well, I think that's quite on the nose and beautiful if we end this poem and realize that, like you talked about, Rilke was a huge fan of solitude. He thinks that we should all go into solitude and that you actually find God a lot closer when you are, in fact, in solitude. And when then my heart with pleasure fills. So I almost imagine this speaker like drawn out on like a couch, like dreaming almost kind of like in a pensive mood. And
Yes.
and then I have this image, this beautiful image of a heart, like in an aorta, like being filled with these daffodils, like, and
Yes.
it's
Ah,
dancing with them, and that's just romantic right there, isn't that?
yeah, yeah.
Like, just to think, like, he made company. Yes, he's alone. So, solitude, I do want to say, it's different than isolation. You don't need to feel
Yes.
like
Yeah.
you are lonely. You're just alone. And
Yeah.
you're alone with God and you're alone in nature. And a lot of times, I'm sure you probably feel this way with the mountains. Like, when you go out there and you're just alone with God in nature, do you feel this sense of like, what do you feel?
I feel presence. Um,
Beautiful. God's
like you
presence.
said, it's definitely
Yes.
not lonely. If you feel lonely, um, then that is maybe a sign that solitude's not what you need right now,
Mm,
right? Like
yeah.
we need a balance of solitude and the company of other people. And
Yeah.
if you are in a space where you feel lonely, then that's a sign, okay, solitude may not be for you right now.
Right.
Or you may just need to learn how to lean into that and realize that solitude itself is the gateway. Just like nature is the gateway to the creator, solitude is also a sort of gateway.
That's beautiful.
And so it's not, again, the point is not to just, well, I'm alone, therefore I'm in solitude, and
We
this
need
is the
both.
whole
We
point.
need
Yeah,
company,
right.
step away.
And
Yeah.
solitude itself is not an end in and of itself. It is a pathway through also to
It is.
God.
That's so good. So, in your words, why do you think we need to, in the modern day, like kind of adopt, this kind of appreciation for nature like the Romantic poets
Mhm.
have done? What do you?
Well, I think it's great that you mentioned that the Romantic poets were sort of reacting against what I would say was a great disruption to the rhythms that humans had always had.
Mm,
So they were looking at an upheaval of being.
mm,
And their poetry was a reaction to that and a call back to something that was much more natural and much more divinely ordered in
mm,
a way. And
mm-hmm.
I think we are certainly living in a time where the way we live in the modern world is not the way people have really ever lived or were ever intended to live.
Mm.
And with the screens and the technology and the AI and all of these things about which people can have all kinds of opinions,
It's
and we
startling,
can,
honestly.
yes,
Yeah.
right, we can talk about, all of the different things, but at the end of the day, we can all agree that this is apparently not good for us. Like we are suffering as a society, and there does need to be a return to something that is real. We just
Yeah.
need real, true, beautiful, tangible things to
Yeah.
ground us and anchor us um,
Yes.
in our bodies, first of all, and in our senses. We need to be incarnational creatures as we
Yeah.
are. We need to have that experience.
And we are
But we
embodied beings. Yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. And we need to be embodied in ourselves and then in the world around us too. And
Yes.
we also just need these access points to something that's not fake.
Not fake.
And yeah,
Yes, yes, this genuinity, this rawness. I'm so
yeah,
happy you're mentioning that. And just circling back to this idea that we are very rushed creatures, and it has something to do with the pace at which our society is just continuing to grow. And looking back at them, the Romantic poets, they just had this deep amazement and attention. They had both. They were amazed at it, they weren't blunted, and they had attention. So I think what we need to do is there's this amazing YouTube video. I sent it to you before we hopped on. You could watch it later. It's called Why Poetry Slows Us Down. And
yes,
she's talking about like she's like a Southern poet. She passed on, but she Ellen Bryant Voint talks about how poetry is something that slows us down and how observing the natural world can also help with that. And I think we all need to slow down and we need to take
yes,
ourselves out of our offices, out of our rooms, out of our, our houses and just go walk and be comfortable walking alone because I think like not at night if you're in a busy area. I'm just saying like
safe, but
but I'm saying like just invite Jesus into that presence and he really does there's something really like for me it's the ocean. I live right here. I'm so blessed to live right by the coast and when I look at stretches of like just like that water it's just like I just think of the depth of God. It just you can't help
yes,
but not. And so
yeah,
yeah, that's I know you guys are under hearing what we're Ashlyn and I are saying is just like really take a time to slow down, go embrace solitude and what Ashlyn said is let the realness of nature kind of reset us like instead of
yes,
being so desensitized,
yes,
um,
yes.
and that one of the reasons we love poetry so much is it helps us to do that. And so, um, what I want to do now is go into your beautiful poem, Ashlyn, because I asked you, I was like, if there's a poem that you could bring in that would speak to nature in a way, and I would love for you to read it, and then we'll talk about just the significance of that to you, because I think that it's just so, so profound. Here we go. Can you see it okay?
Yes, thank you. So this is Agape, Agape. Agape, what a world inside this word. How are we who squint and fret to weigh its worth? With our small souls, what can we know of the bread and wine appearing in our begging hands, the beating wings that shadow us with light? All I know is birds. Like the handful of yellow squawking beaks, wet and unawake within the back porch nest. All through those April days, the parents came and came and came with gift on gift to soothe those helpless, hungry hinges. And maybe that's the story. Maybe agape is the springtime into which we're born, the light too bright for our steel-sealed eyes. Maybe it's the patient parent coming to where we wait, humble, hungry, all our soul agape.
So beautiful. My goodness. I would love to hear like just some first let's talk about this play on words. This, agape
Yes.
and agape. Yeah.
So obviously, they look similar. The spelling is uh, funnily enough very similar between the languages, and so I was this poem was very kindly published by Clay Jar Review this spring, and they had kind of
Amazing.
given this prompt of agape love, and you can take that so many different directions, and many people have, and I of course felt very overwhelmed at the idea of writing this poem about agape love. And I just sort of began playing with this idea that to receive this love, we have to be agape, right? We have to be fully open
Mm,
and just wide open to receiving this love
wow.
and the provision of that love. And it does require something of us. It requires that vulnerability.
It's beautiful. Gosh, I never thought of it that way. And I did look up the word agape, because we looked at gaze, and then
Mhm.
gape is to stare, but
Yes.
agape is to be wide open with surprise and wonder. And oh man, that's just so beautiful. I never thought of it that way, that, to see the agape love of God and, embodied through humans, we have to be wide awake. We have to be wide open. And that's so beautiful.
And
Just if I
there's a little bit of an extra play on that because the edge of the beak of a baby bird is called the gape. So
it
when the
is.
bird is yes, when they're opening their beak like that, that's like that they're gaping is
Oh,
the
I saw
term for
that
that.
photo. Yes, that you posted on
Yes,
your
yes,
Substack. It is beautiful. These like baby beaks just being open like this. I would just love to like do a little like, exposition of your piece like as we're looking at it together. I think you start off with an exclamation. This what a world inside this word. And I love that because, world and word. I mean, there is a world, there's so many worlds that are wrapped up in our words, and it's just so
yes.
it's so wonderful as writers. Um and I think that then it's so beautiful how you ask questions in this piece. This like how are we, like we who, these verbs that you use with squinting and fretting and begging, these kind of things that are, just inherent. We got back to Mary's piece, we can be afraid. We can just,
Yes.
kind of be, trepidation tries to creep up on us. And we know like, with our small souls. So thinking about like even the grandness of our God compared to how finite, small we are,
Yeah.
and doesn't mean insignificant. We just mean
Right.
small. And remember, we talked about just a minute, guys, about small things can be spectacular. So,
Yes.
so just thinking about this, I love that you capture that. And then the beating wings, the bread and the wine. Was this a play on Jesus coming into the piece? I see the beating, I just think of like under the shadow of your wings and,
Right.
body in his.
So the bread and wine, well, I actually did a little bit of research on the background of the word agape, and learned that originally it was used to refer to communion, to Eucharist participation
Wow.
for Christians in the early church, and so they called that an agape feast when you came to the communion table because that was the tangible love of God feeding you. It was in this
Okay.
in a sense, and so.
That's
Um,
beautiful.
Wow, how, what a cool callback to the baby birds being fed. Like we come to the table and receive this food from him spiritually, and we don't know where that comes from. And then the wings that shadow us with light, definitely thinking Psalm 91, just
Yeah.
under the
Shadow of your
shadow of the
wings. Yeah.
wings, and yet the shadow,
Yeah.
just playing on the idea, the shadow of his wings is actually a very light-filled place to be and not dark at all.
Oh, I never thought of that either. This is why I love, talking to fellow poets because, oh man, the Holy Spirit, the way he illuminates through us, I think it's just so beautiful. I was gonna say, That's gorgeous. I want to go to this next line because all I know is birds. Peace out. That's all. I mean, that's literally all I know, period. And I think a lot of back to poets like, hope is a thing with feathers, Emily Dickinson, or, an ode to the skylark, I think that's Keats. And, just thinking about all these,
As kingfishers catch fire, Hopkins. Yeah.
yes, we love the birds. I think, something back to ascension. There's something about birds going up, further in, like C.S. Lewis would talk about, that we cannot help but like love birds as poets. And I think it's just, yeah, that's one of the best, I think, nature,
Mhm.
objects that we get to look at and be amazed by. And then we get to more description of them, the yellow squawking beaks. I love this wet and unawake. I mean, even just the syllable count of that, the wet and unawake, it goes off so nicely. Within the back porch nest, we have monosyllabic with here. It's one syllable each, back porch nest. And when you write, you don't want to overuse the monosyllabics in poetry because then it can become so harsh sounding. But this is a really good example, folks, of, her using monosyllabics to have this kind of sharp sounding back porch nest. And through all through those April days, and see how April days just flows off the tongue. I think the balance of the soft and the harsh sound is really beautiful in this piece. And then you have the use of repetition with came. The parents came and came and came with gift on gift. That's a great example, guys, of the literary device repetition. Um, and then, and then we have alliteration. You're just doing all these literary devices. We have to soothe those helpless, hungry hinges. That's an example of alliteration with the letter H. Really beautiful. I love how you do paint, the parent-child relationship as one of like, you know, uh, care and need. We need, and it's not a bad thing to need. It's not a bad thing to be
Right.
desperate for God's presence. Like we
Yeah.
should be desperate for his presence. And um even through like a care and recovery program I'm doing right now, like it's like this gift of desperation. It's not that we are desperate in the sense that we're hopeless. It's just
Right.
that we know that we need. And
Yeah.
I think that the birds know they need the parent. They know they need food. And
Mhm.
they need the company of them and the gift on gift to soothe. More than ever, I think it's the parents' presence that brings them
Mm.
comfort. Comfort is so necessary. And back to this idea of if you go out in nature and you want to just be there, it's the presence of God.
Yeah.
A thick wood, if you go into the woods, again, don't do it at night. But if you want to go out at dawn and just go see the beautiful woods, I'm just saying, like, it doesn't have to be scary. It's something
Mhm.
that just invite God's presence in. And
Yes.
so I just love, do you have any thoughts on what I'm saying? I would love to hear, because maybe that's the story. Then you go to this kind of like pitch where it's like, you know, we are still in spring. We're entering summer soon, but I love the springtime into which we were born. The light too bright, for our still sealed eyes. And I think that that's really beautiful because, sorry guys, there's a fire truck going by. And for our still sealed eyes, maybe it's the patient parent coming to where we wait, humble, hungry, all our soul agape. These last three lines, I'd love for you to spend some time sharing what your thoughts were on like why you wrote that.
Well, I think it goes back to this idea of that we need a gateway into God,
Hmm.
right? It's too big. Like to say, well, let's sit down and talk about agape love. That is huge
It is.
and super
It is.
abstract for us.
Oh,
Like
I don't
we
blame my in
are,
my thesis, my one of my Patty and I agree what she's saying. She said you need to explain agape love a little bit better to me. I was like, okay, I'll try. I don't know if I can.
it's such a huge topic though. And it's
It's
something that we
it's
can't just reach out and grab a hold of.
yes.
It's not tangible, it's not concrete.
Yeah.
We need that image to give us a foothold into something that goes beyond what we can understand.
Yes.
We can say, well, it's not this, but maybe it's like this. And
Hmm.
that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm telling this story about these birds and just I'm always amazed in a nest of baby birds how helpless the young birds are. Their eyes aren't even
Yeah.
open. They just lay there in the nest. And every time the parent comes back, they, pop that mouth open, get that food, and they just do this all day long. That mouth is always
Yeah.
opening, and the parent's always there giving the food. And yet
Yeah.
the bird is not even able to see yet. It has no idea who its parents are. It
Mm,
has no idea where this food is coming from. It has no idea about this whole world that's waiting for it to leave the nest and
you're
explore this
right.
world. It doesn't know any of this. It just knows I'm hungry. And when I open my mouth, there's someone there to give me what I need.
I love
And
that.
so I think that in these last three lines, I'm thinking, okay, so is that agape love? Is the presence of God that huge, vast world into which we're born that we don't see yet because the light is too bright. We're still
We can't
blinded. We're
fathom
still
it.
in the
Yeah.
nest. We can't look out there and fully realize the extent of what we are born into. But maybe agape love is that reality that's out there beyond what we can see. And then maybe agape love is also that parent that keeps coming to the nest. And we're just waiting there, totally dependent on him, just totally open, waiting for that provision, and he keeps bringing it. And we don't know where it comes from. We don't know how we're
Wow.
sustained. We don't know how we're kept alive, and yet he keeps coming out of this out of this very distant reality that we can't really know yet. He doesn't
So
just say,
beautiful.
well, it's out there, figure it out. He comes out of that down into our space to sustain us and to give us life.
So beautiful. Oh my goodness. I'm getting teary-eyed. I think like I mean, we can't like even fathom like the deep agape love of our God. It's so beautiful. To even think what you were just saying just made me have a whole nother understanding about agape love and being agape to it. May we be like the baby birds, actually,
Yeah.
because God favors little children. He wants us to be. And I know as poets and writers and artists, we're hungry for beauty, and the
Mhm.
agape love that God gives us is deep and it's
Yes.
comforting, but it's also startling and ecstatic. And I think like I just love your piece so much, Ashlyn. It just makes me just think just how exquisite, to be helpless actually. How
Yeah. Yeah.
exquisite it is for us to be in that position and state that we need our God to come down and be with us. We
Yes.
just want to be with him, and like that's what heaven's going to be like. The only reason I think paradise is going to be what it is because God's presence is there. Like,
Yes.
yeah, we may see some crystalline kingdoms and, golden streams and all these things, but like it really is. I really think that what we're hitting on a lot today, and thank you for sharing that, is God's presence.
Yes.
The natural wonder of poetry and nature in poetry. We'll go back to that verse. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. And just to kind of, close us back to that today and think about that verse that, yes, we're talking about the object and the place of the earth that we live in and we see, birds and all these beautiful things, but it really is, it's the fullness of the earth. And
Yes.
it's the fullness of Jesus's presence in the earth that we get to like be like we get to be like Mary Oliver's poem, kind of like startled
Yeah.
um in the sight of experiencing it. And so I hope that you guys enjoyed listening to this podcast. Is there any other last minute things you want to say? Like I just so grateful you came on.
Well, I'm so glad. Thank you so much for having me. This has been just a wonderful discussion and a great blessing to me. I just want to encourage people to try this. Try to cultivate these habits of
Yeah.
attention and looking and taking time because the point is not to produce like some poetic masterpiece, right? The point is to teach yourself what kind of person you want to be and to develop in yourself that quality of being able to look at things and people and places and see God in them.
Yeah.
And so if you're, you really love nature and or you love words, this is perfect for you to kind of have this intersection. So I do want to encourage people like just jump in and start looking at the things around you and seeing that Edenic quality in them.
Amen. Yes, I'm so grateful for that. I wanted to point you to Ashlyn's Substack. It's Wild Goose Words. You guys can find her.
Wild goose words, yes.
And I
And
will,
that poem, Agape Agape, is actually up on my Substack. So if you were really
yeah.
blessed by that poem or you want to read it again or share it, it is up there right now.
Amazing. Yes, so that's up. You guys can reread that. A couple book recommendations. Well, The Wings poem by Mary Oliver is in her collection House of Light. This was a winner of the 1984 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry, and there's a lot of other nature poems in here that are absolutely beautiful, like the deer and lilies and the swan. And then there's an anthology that I would love for you guys to also look at too. Has a lot of nature poetry. It's called The Book of Luminous Things. It's an international anthology of poetry by Czeslaw Milosz. I don't know if I said his name right, but this also was a winner of the Nobel Prize Literature. And I just want to on here, give us this robust, kind of display of different resources for you guys to look at. But again, thank you guys for listening today. Again, this is Heartwork, a podcast on poetry that reaches the eye, the ear, and the heart. And from one beating heart to another, I just want to say, stay true. Thank you guys for listening.